Right. Hey guys, it's Anne with Unexplained Realms, and I am joined by author Doug Carey. This case, he's written a true crime novel, and it is absolutely wild. Not a lot of information out there, so I think we're just going to let you take it away, Doug. How did you come upon this particular case?
Well, this is a true case, and it's one that I came upon because it arose in an area of the desert that's got to be one of the most remote locations in the Western United States. It's an area that I've been visiting for many years, and it's kind of a counterculture mecca, and because out in the middle of this desert valley, 50 miles from the nearest paved road, which by the way itself is in the middle of nowhere, but out in this desert valley are hot springs, and it's kind of an oasis where people take off their clothes and soak and commune
Mm,
with nature. It's not a hookup spot so much as you're hooking up with nature and being
right.
natural and free. And imagine a couple that's kind of counterculture types, and they're on a romantic getaway trip. They are at this location. They get up one beautiful morning, take a walk, and they never come back. And there's a massive search that happens. And 3 years later, miles away, their bodies are found in a shallow grave. And people are like, what
What
happened?
happened? How many miles away was it?
It was about 7 miles away, and it
Mm,
was uphill. So it would have been a really stout kind of a hike to take. And Louise, it was Barry Berman and Louise Berman. Louise had a sore ankle, so it's very unlikely she got there without having at least ridden part of the way in some kind of a vehicle. And by the
mhm.
way, this hippie couple, and they look so unassuming, but
Right.
Barry Berman was the heir apparent to the Kahlua liqueur fortune. So he was actually somebody who was just raised amid massive wealth, which added another dimension to all of this.
Right, and I read that and I thought, "No way, this cannot be," but really, his father was the maker of Kahlua. Yeah, so and I also read something where he despised the money aspect of his father's life, probably leading him to that, free-spirited lifestyle, going out there and being one with the nature, so
It was all part and parcel of his personality. And this was something that manifested from the time he was a child. He grew up in circumstances that most of us can't even imagine. This fabulous
Mhm,
wealth in Beverly Hills, a mansion staffed by servants, a garage full of exotic cars, and anything that he wanted, his parents would give him. But what they didn't give him was a lot of love and attention. And that's, I think, what he wanted. So he became sort of a solitary type young man from an early age,
mhm,
and drew away from his parents' world to the point where he really rejected their ways and ended up going on a seeker's journey that took him to India. And that's where he got
mhm,
involved in with a guru and a Punjabi religion called Radha Swami. And yes, that's
mhm,
part of what I think drew him to this out of
mhm.
the way location.
I'm very familiar with that religion belief system there, so I get it. Now I saw a lot of people in different forums like Reddit when they dissect these cases, like aliens took them or whatever. But obviously, it seems that they came upon foul play. Something or someone harmed them.
Well, the nature of Saline Valley, which is this remote location where they disappeared, kind of lends itself to otherworldly theories because it is an otherworldly kind of location. I've been there many times, and you feel so detached from normal civilization when you get out there. It has a couple of effects. One effect is that you really feel like you're on another planet. Another
Mhm,
effect, though, is that when you encounter other people in the hot springs and people are getting naked, maybe they're getting high, they're drinking,
mhm,
it makes for a feeling of connectedness, and people drop their guard a little bit. And that may be what happened here, is that they dropped their guard and became friendly with someone who actually was a predator.
The wrong person, definitely. And I can see where a predator might find themselves in a place like that. Easy prey, you know?
I think that for the kind of person that the chief suspect was, and by the way, there's never been an arrest in the case. Nobody's ever been charged. But
I
it was
read about that chief suspect, though. I did read a little bit about that. So,
he is a creepy guy, and
mhm,
he is in prison right now. So he has a past that is horrifying.
mhm,
In that location, it's very possible that he misinterpreted the hippies and the nudity as being an invitation for casual sex, when actually it's not a hookup spot, really. Again, it's a kind of a place where you hook up with nature more than you hook up with other people. But it could be misinterpreted by somebody who looks
mhm.
around, sees people walking around with no clothes on, they're all sharing baths, and he thinks, oh, well, maybe if somebody's talking and chatting with me, that means they want me to connect with
Well,
them in a different way.
I feel like, that's like Disneyland for a sexual predator, you know? They have no boundaries, so if they come upon people that are naked and accepting of being naked, I think a predator would accept that as an invitation, so
And I think you're right, and in
mhm.
a location where you kind of feel like there's no rules. And
Absolutely, no boundaries.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
where you could get away with pretty much anything. There is that feeling. It feels a bit like the Wild West, like the rest of civilization doesn't exist, even though it's only a day's drive from Los Angeles. It's a heck
Mhm.
of a day's drive. You drive out towards Death Valley, and then miles and miles on rough dirt roads, cross
Mhm.
over a mountain range that sometimes is impassable. So by the time you actually get in there, you really feel that you're in a completely different place, away from civilization. And I think that can bring out good things in people, but it can also bring out bad things.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I wondered, if it was the main suspect, had he any clue of who they were, or potentially he was just, seeking prey.
I think he might have just been trolling, but that's an interesting question you raise because we know that they shared a hot tub with him
Mhm.
on the evening before
Mhm.
they disappeared, but we don't know what they talked about.
No, it's a potential he thought maybe he could gain something by hurting them. Maybe, I don't know, the sick, twisted mind of a predator, who knows?
Who
Um,
knows?
so that's interesting. You wanna show us the book cover so when it comes
Yeah,
out, people can there you go, and I'm
there
gonna
it is.
actually show this picture at the end of this so that, on the screen, so our viewers on YouTube can see it, and I'll have a link in all of our other, platforms so that they can click it and buy it. I think it's on presale order right now on Amazon, correct?
It is available and on pre-sale, and the publisher Roman and Littlefield has started shipping it. I don't know if Amazon started shipping it yet, but they've
Hmm,
started fulfilling some of those pre-orders. I wanted to mention, Anne, this
mhm.
isn't the only weird thing that's happened out in this valley. I mean, I've
I've heard some stuff out there, yeah.
I'm working on one case right now that is just so strange, and it's right in that same spot. A
Really?
a Vietnam veteran, older guy, but very familiar with the area, drove out there to fix a disabled vehicle. He had come in at night and he parked his truck, and come morning, he was just gone. And the only clue that has been discovered in the past 3 years is a broken shoe, a broken sandal that
Hmm,
myself and my colleague discovered long after the search was concluded. We went out there and scoured for clues. She was able to positively identify it because he had meticulously repaired it himself using adhesive tape and glue. And when we recovered it, she said, "That's his shoe. I remember exactly when he did it a few days before he left." That's the only clue we have found. We have no idea what happened. I have a theory, but no proof.
hmm. Wanna tell us what your theory is?
Yeah. Okay, so it's not a kidnapping. I mean, who's gonna kidnap a chatty older man? This
Yeah.
isn't,
No.
like some of the cases I've worked on where you would think a predator might snatch a girl.
Right.
I mean, he's an older guy, he knows his way around the area. We think what happened is that he got disoriented at night and walked in the wrong direction,
Mm,
and the sandal that we found had a bad break in it that indicated that he might have taken a hard fall.
mm,
He didn't have a flashlight. There was no moon. He could have stepped on a rock. He was older and frail, and he could have taken a hard fall. Now, the place where I found the sandal is on a plateau that when the sun came up in the morning, it would be like being in a frying pan there.
right.
And even if you had a broken hip or a broken leg, you would want to get out of there. If you crawled in the direction of the oasis, which you could see in the distance, you could see the
Mm,
tops of the palm trees, you would crawl into an area where it's incredibly unstable, and there are caves that get carved by intermittent rainfall and then periodically collapse.
mm,
And we tried digging around in some of these collapsed caves and couldn't find any of his remains, but there's a lot of places we didn't check. And my best guess is he crawled into one of those places, he died, and later the rains, when these intermittent rains come, the
yeah,
cave
and I
collapsed.
think, the dirt and the years, I mean, it could be submerged or buried in there deep, and I mean, after a while, I think bones would just disintegrate possibly, especially with the heat out there.
I think you're right. I was digging around in one spot, didn't have the right tools, but it looked like a recent collapse, and I thought maybe he's there. And I was digging, and a sandal. I uncovered a sandal. I thought, oh, this is his other
Wow.
shoe, and it was a Birkenstock. It
Oh,
was a girl's shoe. But I thought, how did it get in here?
yeah,
Like,
so someone
what's the
else's
story?
shoe was in there.
But what's the story
Yeah,
there?
right.
How did some girl's Birkenstock end up entombed in this
That's scary.
collapsed cave,
Makes you
right?
wonder, you wanna go look at the missing persons websites and who was last seen in that area. You never know. That seems very dangerous. Is it an unincorporated area? Is there signs saying, "Hey, don't hang out here"? What's
It's very isolated. It's now part of Death Valley National Park,
Mhm,
but it's not part of Death Valley proper. It's an area called Saline Valley,
mhm.
which is really isolated on its own, surrounded by mountains, difficult to get to. There aren't a lot of signs, there's not a lot of warnings, and you're kind of on your own when you're out there. And there have been a number of weird, unexplained cases. There's another one
Okay.
nearby, another older
I
guy.
wanna hear it. I wanna hear it.
He this was a guy who was a very experienced hiker,
Okay.
and he'd been out there many times, knew his way around the wilderness, parks his truck in this same valley at the bottom of a mountain range, hikes up into the mountains, massive search, not a clue. Not a clue.
Especially with an
No,
experienced hiker. I mean, that's odd.
really odd.
Yeah.
And it's just it's that
Now,
kind
what
of a
are the
place.
years of these situations? Are they, like, with the years of technology, cell phones, or are they in the '80s?
Sure.
So some of them are so people but then I wonder, potentially, cell phone signal out there may not be a thing, may not happen.
There's no cell phone
Okay,
signal.
makes sense.
There yeah, so it's completely isolated in that way. Only a satellite phone would get you the kind of reach.
Mm.
And both the cases I described took place, that both those strange disappearances of older men took place just in the last couple of years.
So I think my first thought, and probably a lot of people would be that, an accident occurred, they fell. But did you ever find anything that led you to a potential serial killer or somebody that was, preying on people wandering through the area?
Again, and preying on old men doesn't fit a typical pattern.
No.
That said, it's within the realm of possibility. I mean, when you have two people who within the same year disappear. Both of them are very experienced, very familiar with the area, and they just vanish. And the searches that were done were quite thorough with ground searchers, helicopters, the whole
Mhm.
thing. So you would think if somebody fell and injured themselves, they'd be spotted. Uh, the searchers are experienced. They know how to look for signs of a human. But I will say the landscape out there is vast
Mhm.
and very deceptive.
Yeah. Now, with the shoe that you found, were you able to turn it over to authorities and reopen a search or anything like that?
It's such an isolated area that I think the authorities have just kind of given up on it. But what we did is we didn't touch it with our hands. We recovered it. We marked the spot, got a reading on the coordinates of where the spot was, and we marked it. We picked it up using gloves and put it into plastic. I then wrapped it in an American flag because Bob was a
Mhm.
veteran, and I thought this is the closest thing we have to remains. So we carefully wrapped it in an American flag, turned it over to his wife, who in turn brought it to authorities. But I don't think there's been any
Mm-mm.
other real follow up because when you're talking about a rural area, Inyo County is 10,000 square miles. They have a very small sheriff's department, a limited budget.
Mhm.
There's just a limit to what they can do and how much time they can spend on trying to find somebody who's vanished in the wilderness.
And I think out there it's really the heat is intense in the summertime, correct? Area.
It's the weather conditions out there are
Mhm.
extreme. The last time I was in there was about a year ago. We had to go through very dangerous snow and mud conditions on roads that were technically closed in order to get in there. And then, but if you wait until later in the season when it's dry and warm, it gets so hot. It's almost as hot as Death Valley
Mhm.
proper in there. It can get to be 120
Oh, yeah.
degrees. It's just, it's not practical to be able to go and search in those
No.
conditions. Even if you want to, it's just debilitating and it's dangerous.
So were those stories included in this book? Or are they on their own with their own books or
I haven't written I've written articles about both
okay.
of those, and they're on my
Mhm.
website, dougcarey.com. I also have a Doug Carey author Facebook page, so
Okay.
there's a couple of ways
Mm.
people can
And
connect
I'll
with
I'll
me.
throw those
I
links on our website, on our social medias as well, so
Wonderful. Yeah. I did mention the cases in the footnotes. I mean, I did a lot of research for this book. It's
mhm.
extensively footnoted. My niche in true crime is to do original research, not just repackage what other people have
Right.
done, but do original work and really go into depth.
Mm. Kinda how I do this show. I do my own writing and research. I don't just copy what other people have already talked about, so, um
Nice.
so what other unexplained strange things have you encountered? I know there was a story that we had talked about that was kind of
Yeah.
unexplained.
Well, the Carly Gousset case, which has been widely publicized, People Magazine Investigates did a 5-year look back kind of an episode in August, and it's been there are Facebook groups. There's all kinds of
Mhm.
coverage on social media. Dr. Phil did an episode on it. It's been highly publicized. But the weird thing is, Anne, she just vanished off the face of the earth.
Mhm.
This is a 16-year-old girl living in a rural area in a neighborhood that's surrounded by wilderness. It's desert. She had a bad night. She had done some kind of a drug and had a bad
Mm.
experience. She'd called her mom to come pick her up in town. She was freaking out. Her mom had spent the night with her, kind of talking her down. And in the morning, her mom wakes up and she's gone. The girl is gone and she's left her cell phone.
Hmm.
So people focused at first on the parents and thought, what happened here? Did the
Mhm.
dad lose his temper and something
Right.
happened? And there's a lot of people that made accusations. But the thing is, there were witnesses who saw her out of the house in the morning, and she seemed fine. I spoke with two of those witnesses myself, interviewed them, uh, and one of them is retired law enforcement, and they both saw her.
Mhm.
And one in particular said she looked fine. She was just wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. And he said she was looking up at the sky as the dawn came. And both the witnesses said that she had a piece of paper in her
Hmm.
hand. And I'll tell you, I would trade all these books for that one piece of
Right.
paper. I would
Yeah.
love to
What was
know
on it?
what
Yeah.
was on it. So she leaves home. She walks about a mile down by the road, and that's the last time she's seen somebody driving by. This is Highway 6. It's a rural two-lane highway that goes through the middle of nowhere there. And then eventually, Highway 6 leads all the way to the East Coast. Somebody spotted her by the road, and that's it. The dogs, that was the
That's
last they found her scent was by the
what
road.
town was this that she disappeared from?
So this is outside of Bishop, California. It's Eastern Sierra. It's a part of California that is not what you think of when you think of
It sounds so
California.
familiar. I am here in California, and I can't place Bishop. I've seen it. I know the name, but I don't know where that's at. Northern or southern is that isn't
Well, kind of central.
okay.
So if you came, yeah, it's about halfway between Los Angeles and Lake Tahoe, east of the Sierra Nevada, west of the Nevada state line. Where she disappeared, where Carly Gousset disappeared, 30 miles from the Nevada state line. If you keep heading
Okay.
on Highway 6, you'd
Okay.
cross into Nevada. And I've driven that road
Mhm.
looking for cameras, talking with people, stopping off. Did you see her? Just recently, I found a couple of people who added some new information just about where they were on the day she disappeared and what cameras existed at that time. But there's just been nothing,
What
nothing.
year was it that she disappeared?
2018, so it's been
So,
over 5
yeah,
years.
but there would be cameras by then. I mean, 2018, we were in our technology, circle and sphere already. So,
It's pretty remote area though.
mhm,
But I thought one of the most telling things in that case was one of the sheriffs who was out looking for her, and I was out there taking pictures and chatting with them. Again, I like to get on the ground and talk to
mhm.
people. He told me the biggest clue is that there is no clue. And I think that's right. She's not out there. I don't believe she just wandered off and crawled into a hole and died.
No,
I
no.
think she willingly or unwillingly, I would bet that she got into a vehicle. But
That's what I was thinking too. That's why the dogs lost the scent. She was no longer on the ground. So,
but there's only a couple of hundred cars every hour or so that go by on this rural highway. It would be kind of like losing the lottery or
mhm,
winning the lottery in reverse. In other words, the odds of a predator just happening by early on a Saturday
mm,
morning
you're
is
right.
astronomical.
Yeah.
But and what other explanation is there? Is it a UFO abduction?
Perhaps the same individuals she was doing drugs with. I mean, and then something happens.
Well,
I
it was
mean,
it was her boyfriend, and she's just a teenager. It was her boyfriend and a couple other people at a house party. I mean, I talked to her boyfriend.
mhm,
I don't think
mhm.
so. The police interviewed him at length. He had an alibi. Everybody had an alibi that checked out.
Anybody else at that party that might have had, like, some kind of a issue with her or jealousy, you know how teens can be with each other, so, someone unsuspecting who no one would have ever known. I find it really strange that she would get in a car with a complete stranger, especially in such a small little rural town. I mean, I don't know.
Well, how about this? I've thought about possibilities. Again, just speculating here. What if it was a neighbor, maybe an adult?
Mhm.
offers her a ride. And it turns out that this adult just is triggered somehow, just can't get over the fact that there's this young, very
Mhm.
beautiful, vulnerable girl in the car and just ends up doing something horrible
Something.
to her. Yeah.
And if she succumbed to that kind of situation, she's passed, I'm sure her body's not within that area. It could be anywhere. I mean, I don't know much about how they cross, like John Doe's and bodies, but I would imagine if she was somewhere and they found a body, would we ever know? Would is there some kind of a database where they cross reference them or something like that?
There is a missing persons database. So if a body was found, I think they would be able to identify it. But here's the thing, there are so many places where her body could have been hidden.
Mhm.
Uh, I've been out driving along there and uh, have inventoried some of the roads that perhaps a predator might have taken if somehow they got her in a car. Where might they have gone? And let's assume they didn't go down to town, that they headed north, maybe crossed into Nevada. Some of these counties up there, I mean, one of the counties up there that potentially she went to only has a population of about 1,000 people. I mean,
Wow,
we're
yeah.
talking vast open spaces with lots of old mines and places
Mhm.
where you could secret a body. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
anything could have happened.
Have there been any sightings? I know I did a show recently on the missing five, the five young men from San Francisco. And one of them, they actually had what appeared to be a sighting. He was way up north and he was coming out of a Target and it looks identical to him. Are any sightings like that or people reporting that they may have seen her?
According to People Magazine Investigates, there was a sighting in a place called Tonopah, Nevada, and the FBI felt that it was a credible enough report that they checked it out, but they have not publicly disclosed what came of that and whether that was a dead end or not. So, yes, there have been at least that one sighting was taken very seriously by law enforcement. There have been
Mhm.
other tips and other sightings. I've had people get in touch with me since I've written about the case, and I'll get a message on Facebook or something telling me, what about this? What do you think about that? I haven't seen anything that seemed like it might be her, but yeah, anything's possible. It could be that she was trafficked. I mean, again,
Mhm.
she was a strikingly pretty
Mhm.
girl with long hair. She's just young with the green
Right.
eyes, the kind of person that if somebody did have predatory intent or
She
was
would be the
looking,
one, yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
The attractive, young, vibrant, that's the type they take, you know? Um,
unfortunately.
yeah. So strange. The sightings, though, I was gonna say something about that again, I lost my thought.
Yeah.
But, yeah, um oh, I know what I was thinking. My first thought when you said that, law enforcement or FBI didn't discuss it, to me, that's always a positive sign that it's a possible credible tip because what we know about law enforcement is if they have something, they don't tell us. They even have something even remotely possibly, linked to a case, they usually stay quiet. When they come out and say it's a dead end, no further leads, it's a dead end. So maybe potentially she may be in that area. Maybe she went with someone or got trapped or, coerced to go with someone. So, I don't know.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I would love to see that case resolved. It is one that is so troubling to me and to many, many other
Mhm.
people across the country. It just seems so tragic and unfair that
Mhm.
a girl so young and vibrant with her whole life ahead of her, who grew up in an area that's so remote and peaceful, would just vanish like
Right.
that. You have to think something terrible happened. It's very unlikely
Mhm.
she was a runaway in that circle.
No, it didn't seem like it. I mean, after a bad experience the night before and she reaches out to her mom, that indicates close familial connections. I mean, if she was gonna run away, why? If you had the ability as a teenager to call your mom and say, "I did drugs, I messed up, I need help," why would you run away from it? I mean, um most teens don't feel they can go to their parents, so that kinda indicates she wouldn't have had a reason to run away. Sounds like she had supportive parents.
She did, and they were very understanding, very down to
Mhm,
earth
mhm.
people. Uh, and I've spent time with them. I've been in the house. I've been in the bedroom. I've been to where she was last seen. I've spoken with the neighbors, and it just doesn't add up. And I've tried starting over also. Within the last year, as the 5 year mark approached, I thought, wipe the slate clean, just start over. That's when I started thinking, well, who else maybe lives in the area? I went through the database of people who are registered sex offenders.
Mhm.
Were they checked out? Are there any neighbors who are questionable or suspicious? Have they checked out? I do have some back channel contacts with law enforcement, and I've talked to them. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And it's just one of those things where
Mm.
everybody is stumped, just
Yeah,
completely stumped.
that
It's
is
the
true.
kind of thing that makes you think if there was a UFO abduction,
Maybe they took her, yeah.
this would be the kind of case where it would happen, where you've
Mhm.
got somebody that just vanishes like this. Because if she was a runaway, look, by now she would have gotten in touch with her
Someone
boyfriend.
would have seen something. Runaways don't go they don't just poof, disappear. They emerge at one point. Things get too hard as a runaway and you find them, and I don't know what was her history like. Had she used drugs previously? Was there kind of some issues with it or
She'd gotten in trouble for
Mhm.
Carly had gotten in trouble for using marijuana. She had been put in a special program at the high school, but it wasn't outside the realm of what kids do sometimes.
Yeah, no, marijuana just doesn't seem to be something that's gonna make somebody go mad and lose their way in the world.
Right, right.
Some of the harder drugs maybe, but not marijuana, so
She
yeah.
had supportive and understanding parents. She has supportive and understanding parents, and also a social circle of friends and a boyfriend, and they were
Mm,
they were reportedly very close. He seemed devastated after she vanished, and it's just been a tragedy for everybody. But there's no closure. There's no closure here because nothing has really been crossed off the list. I mean, everything
right.
remains at least theoretically possible. And even
Mhm.
though to me the evidence points towards abduction, it's very thin. There's you can't say conclusively, yeah, she was abducted. It feels like foul play.
Right. It does. It really feels like foul play to me. I think though, depending on what law enforcement is doing, it may be that they just want to dismiss it as a runaway. A lot of times that happens, but it does feel like foul play. Perhaps, like we said earlier, the one in a million chances of an actual predator driving by at that time, maybe it happened.
Well, I've said that to people, and you have to give credit to law enforcement. The sheriff up in Mono County, where Carly was living, Ingrid Braun, is a wonderful woman, very smart, very committed to the
Mhm.
case. She's really her and
Good.
her team have really worked it, but they're stumped like the rest of it. They just have no idea what might have happened to Carly, and I'm completely baffled and troubled. If there was one case that I could solve, I would
This would be
love
it. Yeah.
to solve this one. But I don't know what else to do.
Someone somewhere knows something. I mean, people don't just disappear. If she was taken or fell upon foul play, taken somewhere else, wherever she ended up, someone else knows something. I mean, it's just a matter of, and it's shocking that this has been very publicized and still nothing has come up, which is strange. Usually, when it's this publicized, something, tips come in, directions are pointed, something, but strange.
So it in the Berman murders, it was
Mhm.
similar, where there
Mhm.
were a lot of theories. They just vanished. But because it was two people, law enforcement was pretty well convinced that it must be foul play, because how do two
Mm.
people just vanish? But there were some people who thought, well, Barry Berman rejected his father's wealth. Maybe they just decided to throw it all in and go to some remote part of the world. Anything could have happened. And as time passed, the theories became more and more attenuated. There were people back then saying, "Oh, UFO abduction," and I had in the Carly Gousset case, I had somebody tell me, "Listen, I think she was taken to seed the universe." Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So
maybe.
go figure. But then in the Berman case, what ends up happening is a hiker just stumbles across a
Mhm.
human skull. And you realize that after the law enforcement gets out there, they realize that no, this is a
This
case
is
of
the
foul
case.
play. And
Yeah,
that's what I think maybe will happen with Carly Gousset, that at some point there'll
probably.
there'll be a clue. But yeah, that's a troubling one. The area that I mine for stories, which is the
Mm.
deserts of California,
Mhm.
outside of the urban areas, the rural parts of California that are desert, Nevada, up into parts of Utah, down into Arizona, New Mexico, those open desert areas. That's where I go to look for stories mostly.
Mhm.
And it's just the kind of place where strange things happen. You hear about Area 51,
Oh,
or
yeah.
you hear about all these unexplained phenomena. If there are going to be unexplained phenomena, that's where they're going
Oh,
to
yeah.
occur.
I think if aliens were really gonna come, they would land in the desert. So, a vast area, and nobody really goes out there. Um, in the Berman murders, though, I initially thought, before I started really reading, I thought, maybe aliens, something. But what we know now, and I just don't want to give too much away. I want people to buy your book, but what was the potential motive if this suspect that we've talked about, if he did it, what was the motive?
So from the beginning, there was one deputy, Leon Boyer, who just was dogged about pursuing the case.
Mhm.
And he was firmly convinced, and remains firmly convinced, that the chief suspect had a sexual motivation. And
Mm.
whether he wanted to actually just attack them and have some sort of sadistic ritual with them,
Mhm.
or whether he made a proposition that escalated into a fight, something happened that led to murder, and the core premise of it
Mhm.
was a sexual motivation. And the book follows the chief suspect all the way to the prison where he is
Good.
now.
That's
And what
awesome.
and what landed him in prison wasn't the Berman murders, because he's never
Mhm.
been arrested, never been charged. He's the suspect. They've had their eye on him, but they just don't have
Mhm.
enough evidence.
Yeah.
That's what their conclusion was. But in other cases, he committed the most horrific sexual crimes imaginable. And
Mhm.
just a word of warning to your viewers. I mean, it is explicit. I
Mhm.
I just tell it as it is, and I do put a warning in there, because the
Right.
the facts are what he did with those girls was as bad as it gets.
Mhm.
And it makes you think, gosh, if he went on in life to do something like that, Was that just happened? The guy reaches midlife and suddenly he's a sexual predator, or does that explain what may have happened
Right. No, I
to
get it.
Berman?
So,
Yeah.
I believed also that it was, he was a sexual predator because I don't remember, I think initial reports from that time period, a woman that had been kind of associating with all of them after he had gone on his walk, and I guess the Bermans had gone exploring, he came back and propositioned another woman sexually, and it was very creepy or something like that. She had described it as. So,
So I did interview her.
mhm,
Um, she was there with her longtime companion, partner. Uh, they are very private people, kind of off the grid people. It was not easy to find
I
them, but
bet.
I did. I did, and they were surprised that I located them. And my agreement with her was that I wouldn't reveal their names. I would use pseudonyms. So I
Mhm,
use pseudonyms in the book. But yeah, she described that for me and what happened when he, this chief suspect, comes into camp. He'd been and gone. Maybe he'd been gone doing harm to the Burmans.
mhm.
That's
Right.
the theory. He returns to camp covered in dust. He's been gone all day. He walks right over to her campsite where her and her partner have just arrived. And the next thing you know, he's floating the idea that they all have
A
a
threesome, yeah.
threesome. Like, who
Yeah.
does that? These hot springs, the thing, yes, people get naked at
Mhm.
these hot springs. They're hippie hot
Right.
springs, but it's about hooking up with
Mhm.
nature. It's not a singles bar.
No, and if anything occurs in the sexual nature, it's most likely because these people have connected. It's not like going out and having a one night stand. It's something very different. I've encountered those places before. I've never been like involved in it, but in my travels, I have seen a few places like that. And I get it. Very much hippie, very much, into just feeling the earth without clothes. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I've been there many
mhm,
times over the years. My wife and I have both been there, and
mhm,
it feels
mhm,
natural in that environment to get naked, soak in a tub.
right.
People are very polite.
Mhm.
You don't leer at somebody.
No, that's what it's there
You
for.
can glance,
Mhm.
you can look around, but it would be an unusual environment for somebody uh, to
Just kinda
try to
hit you up
hook
and
up
say,
with.
"Hey, let's hook up."
Yeah, it's
Like I said earlier, I think that that would be Disneyland for a sexual predator. Predators don't have boundaries. They don't think rationally like the rest of us. So, sexual predator, oh, wow, naked people, his thoughts are going everywhere, off the charts. So,
I that's as good a theory as any of us have, and that's definitely the theory that law enforcement
mhm,
was operating on. And as I explore in the book, the chief suspect's travels through life and his relationships with women. Uh, it it does fit that
mhm.
something may have happened here. But I have other evidence too that I was able to develop. I
Oh,
won't
yeah,
give
no,
that
don't
away
give that away. Let's make them buy the book.
leave a
Buy
little.
the book. No, yeah. So, anything weird that's happened to you or after the fact, while you're investigating these things or any of these cases?
Well, I've never felt concerned for my own
Mm.
safety. Um, Sometimes, I mean, I have done work down in Mexico. I covered the massacre of the moms and kids from the breakaway
Oh,
Mormon
I read that.
colony. They were traveling on a back road and they got shot to pieces. I
Mm.
mean, it does make me nervous sometimes being down there or doing work down there. The last time I went to Mexico to cover the migrant crisis. I did, even though I speak Spanish
Mm.
passably, I hired a local, somebody that I knew, to just a guy who knew his way around, young, strong, and savvy about what goes on in the street, to just kind of watch my back as I went into some of these areas and did
Mhm.
interviews and such, because where the migrants end up sometimes isn't the safest places. But in terms of my own safety, I mean, my wife worries a bit, and that I'm deep into unsolved cases that could be sensitive. There could be somebody out there that feels that I'm getting too close to them. But knock on
Right.
wood,
Nothing's
I
happened.
haven't felt threatened
Mhm.
yet. So,
Yeah.
but I do know how to handle myself out
Mhm.
there. I'm a very experienced of traveling and getting around in the deserts and in the back areas. And like anybody out there, I I wouldn't surrender without a fight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, unlike the Burmans, I mean, most of us who have spent a lot of time in those areas, we're prepared to defend
Right.
ourselves because nobody's going to run defend you in
Mm-mm.
that kind of
But
place.
that was what, 1986, right?
It
So
was.
I feel like, it wasn't that far off from the whole hippie movement in the 70s. And, I know there was crime in the 80s, but nothing like what we see today. So perhaps they just didn't feel they needed to defend themselves. They never saw it coming.
Well, I think that's right. And it also, the idea of self-defense was contrary to their religious
Mhm.
philosophy. Both of them were disciples of a Punjabi guru. Barry had
Mhm.
actually done a seeker's journey to India. Both of them were disciples of Charan Singh, and they very much believed in the
Peace
idea
and
that you
yeah.
peace and nonviolence, you don't kill, you don't eat meat, and you trust in the energy of the
Mhm.
universe and your own good karma. Um, but I think whatever their good karma was, it definitely failed them in
Right.
that instance. Yeah.
I
Um,
definitely am a believer in most of those things, but realistically in 2024, we know that if we have to throw our fists up, we just might have to. It's just what it is.
yeah.
Even though we want to believe in peace and harmony, it's just not it's not everybody else's view right now in the world. So,
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about you, but I still feel much safer out in those areas traveling in the desert. I mean, I'm wary.
mhm,
I wouldn't just charge up to a stranger, nor would I take kindly to somebody just out of the blue trying to approach me. I'll tell people if I'm out in the desert, hey, don't get any closer.
mhm,
Just back off. Tell me what you're about.
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, that comes with the territory. You got to be able to handle yourself. But I feel less safe these days just in big crowd situations
Mhm,
where I feel there might be a predator. So I'm trying to teach myself to always have an eye towards, what's your escape route going to be? What are
right.
you going to do if something bad happens? If somebody comes in here with a gun and starts shooting, where are you going
Exactly.
to go? I think
I
we all have to think that way
Mhm.
now.
It's
It's just,
horrible, but and I try to mostly, avoid congested types of places or businesses because what if there is no escape route? I wanna go home. So, I don't know, this world is scary these days. Hopefully, there is some kind of a break for the Bermans at one point. Maybe perhaps your book will shed some light on something and maybe he'll be convicted, the suspect.
well, the friends and family who have, who were so generous in providing information and images and things for the project have told me they feel a sense of closure now because at least there's a plausible theory about what
Mhm.
what may have happened. So we may not have all the answers, but at least we've got some ideas.
You kind of basically know what's happened there, though DNA was I don't even think it was in its infancy at that time, maybe, but,
Maybe.
there's just no way for anybody to link him unless he admits it, so and none of these criminals admit it if it's going to add time to their current sentence, so yeah, but
Yeah, and
hopefully with your book, giving like the just the raw facts, step by step, perhaps that helps the family. So,
I hope so. And I did. It took me years, but I did get a couple of the chief suspect's family members to talk to me, and
Oh,
they told
nice.
me, "Don't ever expect that he's going to admit to anything. That's just not in his
Mhm.
DNA, so to speak, that he would admit to anything." But speaking of DNA, they did collect a lot of debris and just
Mhm.
items surrounding the gravesite when it was finally excavated. I asked the sheriff's department, could you go through that and DNA test some things? It's possible that even with the passage of time, for example, the if the if the suspect was out there working very hard to dig a grave, maybe there's something that had his DNA on it. Maybe he
Mhm.
shed some hair. It's highly unlikely after this amount of time, but when an investigation has gone on this long, I mean, it's why not try? But again, I think
Mhm.
it's a matter of resources and the fact that he is in prison.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, how deep do we need to go to clear this case off our books when
Mhm.
you're talking a rural county with a limited budget. Uh,
Mm.
so I mean, I've I've really pushed them as much as I possibly can. But in the end, they have to make their own decision, their own balance of resources where they're gonna invest their time and
Mhm.
energy. Um, but at least I can
Yeah.
offer
Yeah.
a theory. Yeah.
You never know, it might jog someone's memory, something comes about after reading your book, remembering something, who knows?
You never know. There
Mm.
is some missing jewelry that
Really?
could
Mm.
possibly be tied to the crime scene. So you just don't know.
Mhm. Well, I wanna thank you for joining us. I can't wait to get my hands on that one and read it. And again, like I said, I'm gonna put the links in our website, our show notes, and, hopefully lots of other listeners and viewers will go forward and purchase that book too. So,
I really appreciate it, and
yes.
look for more from me. I'm hard
Yes.
at work on my second book.
Well,
Uh,
anytime you wanna come back and share it, you just let me know. We'll do it again.
Wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You have a good night.
You too.
All right.